Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to the latest episode of our sports show. As you know, we've been previewing and airing live on air for this past month about our upcoming documentary, Rugby Global Legends, My Life in Rugby. So as you know, part of this documentary, we come from the heartland of Munster Rugby, a real passionate base of rugby supporters here in Ireland, where we're situated right here in the heart of Munster Rugby. And obviously, we've decided to do a documentary for our fan base and for all our audience and our sort of listeners there about global sort of rugby legends. So these are rugby legends in terms of their life stories, in terms of Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. So Northern Hemisphere, we think of England, Ireland, Wales, Scotland, France and Italy, and Southern Hemisphere rugby then of Australia, New Zealand, South Africa and Argentina. And our guest this evening is a one and only Wallabies sort of legend. He's the top scorer for Australia in Rugby World Cups, the highest try scorer in Rugby World Cup history for Australia. In fact, he played the 2007 World Cup, scoring 7 tries during that tournament, one of the records. He made his debut against the Springboks in 2005 after coming off a campaign where he was voted Rookie Player of the Year in Australia. He's appeared for Australia 71 times, scoring 171 points for the Wallabies. The one and only, played fullback and wingback for Australia, appeared in 2 World Cups, the one and only Drew Mitchell. Drew, first of all, I suppose rugby, you're looking at it now, you're reflecting like us in terms of the media from the other side of the angle now, looking at rugby players, assessing sort of form, assessing sort of rise and starting. Do you think some of the stories we're hearing about players' sudden rise to the fame, guys getting picked out of 7 squads, and within 8 or 9 months being on an international rugby player, guys getting picked up out of college teams and then breaking on, are those sort of stories becoming less and less in sort of global rugby as we go forward now? Are they sort of fairy tale sort of stories that we're hearing from Matt Kito and Conrad Smith? Are they becoming less and less of the norm?
Yeah, I think to a degree. I think, Matt Kito's story, having not played any sort of Super Rugby, getting straight in from, I guess, a little small dose from what Eddie Jones saw him at training. It's a pretty unique story. So there's not too many. I don't think we're going to see too many of those types of stories. But I don't know. I think it might be a little bit different down here in the South. But the general perception, I think anyway, at least with the rugby supporting group here in Australia, is it's almost once you get to 30 and almost like they want to move you on. We're seeing it now. Bernard Foley's the number 10. Like just the dialogue and the narrative that the words that the supporters use about, he's 33. He's just holding up someone's development in Noah Olesio, who's 22. Like, I don't buy into that. Like, if you're hot, like if you're good enough, you'll sort of push on with selection and that type of thing. It's not about Bernard Foley holding up someone's development just because he's 33, or because he's 33 we should move him on and just give someone who's not quite ready yet the opportunity to take up that jersey. You've got to earn the jersey. So I think for a long time, I think you look at a lot of the narrative in social media and even in traditional media as well here in Australia, is that when someone comes back, like Kurtley Beale, for example, he's just come back and everyone's like, no, move him on. It's just holding up someone else's spot. Like, the guy's 33 years old and he's still got so much good footy in front of him. But we're so quick here in Australia to just want to see the next generation. And maybe that's because we haven't been successful for a long time. But I think also, like, our hurriedness to get young players in can also work to the detriment of those players' development as well. If they're not ready and they're thrown in and they're losing 30 to 50 points each game and they're not actually learning how to steer a game and to close out a game and those types of things. And, it can be very detrimental to their development. I don't know. So I guess going back to your first question, I think there's a lot of young players getting an opportunity before they should here in Australia. And I think a lot of that's also probably because we're stretched too thin with 5 teams. Now, I don't know if we have the depth necessarily to support 5 teams well. And that's then giving players opportunities at least the provincial level than they probably would have had otherwise. and therefore players are getting picked from sevens and from club rugby and that type of thing pretty early, pretty young as well. And there's just, I don't know. I know a couple of years ago when our under-20s won the World Cup, there were calls from former Wallabies to say, just pick them all as the Wallabies now going into the next World Cup. And I'm like, it's madness sometimes, I think. But I think if a player's good enough, he's old enough, and also and that goes on the other side. If he's still playing well, it doesn't matter how old he is either. So, I don't know. I think it's probably a bit more so. I don't know. You guys up in the Northern Hemisphere are probably a bit more inclined to let players play out and really value their experience and really celebrate their experience. Players of the likes of like Johnny Sexton and Alan Wynne-Jones and these guys who are just playing on. I know that Alan Wynne-Jones had some speculation recently with some comments from other players from outside the circle, but I don't know. I think the older players are becoming less and less here in Australia, which means those younger players are getting more of an opportunity.
And we'll come back now with Ike back to Drew Mitchell, the rugby player. And Drew, growing up, I was hearing an awful lot of stories about young players. John Eales, big cricketer when he was growing up. Joel Stransky, big into football. Jesse Jan de Villiers, big swimmer, very sort of keen into swimming in terms of. Tell me about Drew Mitchell growing up as a child. Did you come from a big family? Had you much brothers and sisters? Was it a sporting house? And did you try your hand at everything? And was rugby the first love, or were you much a talented sportsman? Were you a good track and field guy, good at athletics? Was there a bit of a boxer in you? Yeah. What was the strengths of Drew Mitchell?
Mate, I'm the youngest of three boys. We're all pretty athletic and sporting growing up. So we tried our hand at everything. My father was in the army, so we moved a lot down up and down the east coast of Australia mostly. And so with that, I think sport was sort of my vehicle to fit into different school groups and those types of things. So I went to 6 different primary schools. And like I said, I think being handy at sport certainly helped me blend into my environment at schools at school time and in the classrooms and things. But in terms of sport, I played pretty much what was on offer. We grew up largely playing rugby league, to be honest. Rugby league was probably our number one sport in the winter, and then in the summer we did little athletics, which is track and field. We spent some time down the south of Australia in Victoria, which is AFL country, the Australian rules football. I tried my hand at that, but I wasn't a very good kicker, which is pretty much the number one skill you need to have playing that game. I think I grew up, and even in my career as well, I wasn't probably, especially at the start of my professional career, probably wasn't the best kicker, but I was right-handed, left-footed. So what felt good in my hands didn't feel good at my feet. So it took me a little while to work out, the ball drop and that type of thing as well, to kind of get the touch of my left hand, which is my non-preferred hand, but over my preferred foot. But I think rugby league, mate. I played all the way up until I was 17. I didn't play union until I was 13 at a private school. Got to play both on the weekends for those 5 years. And I just was enjoying rugby union more because rugby league just became really repetitive to me. It was, 3 forward hit ups, then you go wide, and then you get to your kick, and then you chase. It was almost like the same carbon copy set of 6 every time. You knew who was coming out of your ends, as the back 3 were carrying it. Then it was it just became very repetitive. Whereas rugby union, obviously with the set piece, the strategy around it, the kicking game, the turnover, the transition game and turnover and that type of thing, it just threw a lot more variables and a lot more just different pictures at me, which I enjoyed most, and trying to kind of, I guess decipher the game on the run was really appealing. So once I got to 17, I had a contract offer from rugby league here in Australia and also rugby union. So I think, and also someone said to me, Drew, with rugby league, you get to go to places like Townsville and Newcastle, which are kind of sort of smaller rural towns here in Australia. Or with rugby union, you get to go to Paris and London. So that helped me make my decision to go to rugby union.
And I suppose, Drew, were you academically bright? Did your parents, you mentioned your father coming from an army sort of base, did your parents want you to go down, follow that sort of same sort of a route, or was it university bound, or what was the career? Because there's only a small percentage of players make rugby players, as you know, and some of them can get injuries very early on. Even the most promising rugby player, and one bad injury can turn all that upside down. So what was the idea of Drew Mitchell if, God forbid, rugby didn't work out? What way did he see himself professional wise going? What was the orientation?
Well, I mean, look, to be honest, I didn't really have too much of a plan. Like academically, I got by. Like I certainly wasn't. I mean, I only sat at the front of my class because I'm basically blind in my right eye, so I had to sit up the front. My mum would expose me at parent-teacher interviews about me not wearing my glasses in class. But so that was probably the only time I was at the front of the class, and it was more physically rather than academically. But look, it was one of those things. I think my parents, they never forced me into doing anything necessarily. I guess we kind of knew that the army was there. My two older brothers they've gone on, and they're both soldiers now. They've been in the army for a good 20 odd years themselves. So I guess I probably always knew that was there as an option. But my parents, to be honest, whilst they were keen to get me educated and they sent me to a private school, and we're big on me doing my homework, my assessments, and those types of things. I think in terms of like university, or like, I think they saw that I had a passion, and they saw how dedicated I was to it. And so I think it would be different if they didn't see how much I was committing myself and how disciplined I was to trying to make rugby work, that maybe their mindset around my education may have been different. But I think they were just happy that I wasn't going down a bad path. I wasn't hanging with the wrong crowd. I was committing myself to something positive. I was committed to it. I was disciplined around my training, and I was enjoying it as well. And so for my parents, that was enough. They were like, they knew that I was getting an education, and I guess they didn't need me to be the Ducks of the college or anything like that. When they saw that, I was committed, and I showed the capacity to commit to something and be disciplined around it. And so I guess they just thought, well, if rugby doesn't work, he's still got that application in, the ability to have that application in something. So I guess that kind of alleviated any of their sort of concerns around what I might do if, say, for example, I got a career-ending injury or something.
I suppose, Drew, before I bring you on to the club career and Australia, something touched on me there. I suppose I'm just throwing a while, I guess I might be wrong by years, but I imagine in 1999 when Australia won the Rugby World Cup, when you were watching Tim Horan, Sipu Kepu, Matt Burke, John Eales, you were probably I'd say 9 years old, were you?
No. 99, I was 15.
Or 15, obviously. So
yeah.
Then obviously as a 15-year-old in Australia and sort of team, that must have been a massive bearing on you, seeing that a big national global event, obviously the hysteria of the World Cup. Did you find role models within that team that you said, yeah, I want to be the next Timmy Horan out in the backyard sort of, and did that sort of drive that, fuel that ambition, that seeing Australia's success in that Rugby World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, growing up, rugby league was probably the household sport that we were watching more often than not. And, a lot of that sort of domestic type of footy, and, obviously State of Origin is sort of the pinnacle for their game, and the odd international. But, we're sort of seeing now with the Rugby League World Cup, international scene's not quite where it needs to be in terms to rival rugby union on that level at least. But, yeah, I mean, I've seen those guys. It was obviously fantastic. It probably wasn't until around sort of, like the next couple of years off the back of that. And then I really started to go out to Ballymore and watch the Queensland Reds play. And I actually, and because I was a left-footed fullback, I really got to like Chris Latham. He was in that squad in 99, but I don't know if he played in the final. But and he was just, I just liked the way he played. It just, like, he had deceptive strength. He had a great ability in open play. He had this tremendous left foot spiraling torpedo punt. And yeah, so I just really watched Latho's game, I think. And then I guess I finished school in 2001, picked up like my first contract 2002, 2003, and found myself in the same squad as Chris Latham. And that was pretty surreal, to be to kind of go to grow up for a few years, just really watching this guy and idolizing the way he plays, and then all of a sudden you're there stretching his hamstrings as you're getting ready to prepare for a training session. Was pretty surreal.
And obviously, you mentioned the Queensland Reds in obviously making your appearance for them in 2004. Did you expect when you sort of Queensland Reds in 2004, obviously your goal was to make the club team in terms that you probably thought yourself maybe if I have a good maybe 2 or 3 years seasons with the club team that Australia might come an option one day. Do you expect, first of all, your Queensland Red in 04, your Wallaby in 05 in terms of that? And that seems to be the rapid growth. If you're good enough straight from the off, they're going to take you. And did that sort of surprise you in terms of how quick it came around again?
Yeah, look, it did, mate. Because 2004, the Queensland Reds, like it was Super 12 back in those days, and we for a few years we didn't kind of get past 10th, so we didn't have a huge amount of success. We had a tremendous amount of injuries in the back line for those years, and I found myself I was 81 kilos wringing wet in my debut, and I was playing at 13, which I really hadn't played any football at outside centre, and you're playing the likes of Tana Umaga and Joubert and all these guys, and they're basically just holding me up in a tackle, and I just wasn't strong enough. I was quick and I had some skill and whatever, but in those moments, I guess I realised pretty quickly that physically I still hadn't developed, and I needed to get into the gym because I didn't touch a weight until after I finished school. So, look, it was quick. It was pretty rapid. I found myself in the Wallabies squad in 2004 and went on the tour 2004, and I was named on the bench for Eddie Jones's squad to play England at Twickenham. And as we know, you got to get on the field to be captain. At halftime, Eddie Jones came in and said, "Just get ready. You're going to get on." And then the game got a bit closer, and our boys went on to win it, which was fantastic. But I didn't get called up to get on the field that day. So I was pretty gutted. Obviously, not capped in 2004. The last game of the tour, my parents had flown all around and followed the tour in 2004. And I remember I was there with the team photo, and everyone was pretty happy, obviously. And I remember John Muggleton, the defensive coach, came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, mate, you're not ready anyway." Which has been a tough love, which is probably what we probably grew up with a fair bit here in Australia, a bit of tough love, but not what you really want to hear when you just your I guess your childhood dream is so close, but you have to go back, and you're basically from that point on. I was on holidays and start again the following year, but I was lucky enough to get my chance the following year, 2005, and I don't know. I guess it was rapid because in a couple of years before that, I played 4 tournaments for Australian Sevens. Got a chance in the Queensland Red side 2004, and in a team that we weren't having too much success. I guess I was just lucky that Eddie Jones had a bit of an eye for young guys. Like I said, the year before it was Matt Giddo's opportunity, and then he picked me in that sort of 2004, 2005 time.
Tell me, Drew, obviously in 04, they felt, even after coming off a great sort of club year where we voted Rookie of the Year, 2005, 2006, was that a sort of area where you said that, right, I'm 80% there, I'm missing that final ingredient, that final quarter, and I just need to get that extra, eke out that extra 10 or 15% to get to where the cream of the crop is? Because towards the end of 2006, coming into 2007, it was really lift off in terms of Drew Mitchell.
Yeah, look, 2005 was a big year, and in some ways, I probably wasn't mature enough to really understand the gravity of it. And 2005, I made 10 appearances for the Wallabies. I had a good spring tour, and probably just thought, because of those things that you've mentioned just earlier, just about how quickly it came. And I don't know, maybe at the time I thought, you know what, this whole international footy thing's a bit easy, because it came to me quite quickly. 2006, I didn't get picked in the 44-man squad. I played Super Rugby 2006, and in 2006, I think John Connolly's first squad, I didn't get picked in any of it, the wider training group or anything. So I remember driving into Ballymore one morning, and there was a squad training out in the field, and I was going into physio, and I asked the physios who that was, and they said, "Oh, that's the Wallaby squad." So that was how I found out that I didn't make it in 2006, and didn't play a single test in 2006. So I played 10 in 2005, 0 in 2006, and that was probably well, pardon my language, but kick up the arse I probably needed, to be honest. I realised then pretty quickly that you can't just rely on what your natural talents are and natural abilities and those types of things. You've got to work for it, and it's not just about reaching your goal. It's like getting a jersey is not like, that's one thing, but it's not enough. You've got to keep earning it to stay in that squad. And I think as much as you probably don't like to admit it at the time, I probably got a little bit complacent, or just probably thought that it was just going to keep coming in the fashion that it did in 2005, and 2006 was a pretty rude awakening for me. So found myself back in the squad, the touring squad in 2006, the back end of the Tri-Nations, and then on the spring tour, but was never picked in a test team. But then I was like, okay, World Cup next year. I went on a holiday at the end of 2006, went to America and whatnot, and then I had to come straight into second day in Australia to an early World Cup training camp, the Australian Institute of Sport, and blokes were getting sent home if they didn't hit their physical marks and, like the conditioning markers and those types of things. And I was, to be honest, I was probably 1 or 2 reps away from getting sent home. I probably relaxed a little bit too much on that American holiday, but that was sort of probably what like I said, it was a real maturing moment for me. And just time to say, okay, I'm no longer just sort of the young kid that's going to get picked off his natural ability. He's got to put the work in. And I just went away and I worked hard in the gym. I knew that was an area that I needed. I still remember now, I was playing for the Reds against the Brumbies, and the Brumbies kicked off the ball to me, and I could just remember George Gregan just in the background just calling apples, apples, apples. And I didn't know what it meant. And I wish I still didn't, because it broke my heart a little bit when I found out. But apples was the term that Griggs gave me, because he thought that every time I got the ball, there was a turnover. So apple turnover. And so that was like a way for him to highlight that I was an opportunity for them at the breakdown, because I wasn't strong enough. I was physically incapable of fighting on the ground and getting the ball back when you got the George Smiths of the world getting over the ball. So knowing that someone like that identified me as a pretty easy turnover, that was also, those types of things, clearly it stuck with me if I'm still talking about it all these years later. But as hard as they are to hear, sometimes it's good for your development, because, I went away and made sure that, I no longer deserve that nickname, and worked in the gym and got to a point where I could fight my own a little bit in the contact areas.
And Drew, in terms of those 2 years, was there any sort of bitterness or resentment there to you in terms of Eddie Jones? Did you feel he was picking on you a bit to try and make it a point in terms of you might have all this God-given talent, but listen, if you don't fall into line, that you're not going to be in my reckoning? And did you feel maybe in 2007 you probably had to win Eddie over in terms of?
Well, no, it was a change of coach, really, because 6 and 7 was John Connolly. So okay. There was a change in coach, and I hadn't met John, I hadn't spoken to him, I hadn't had any sort of conversation with him at all. So I guess he was coming in fresh, and he saw John Knuckles Connolly. He's got a great eye for rugby, and not just for the talent, but for the work and for the humility and all those types of things, and. I guess at the time I was probably pretty bitter, but that was probably just the arrogance and the young ego in me more than anything, just because I was probably a bit more embarrassed than anything. Going from starting 10 tests in 2005 to not even getting in a wider training squad. So probably more embarrassment, and then try to hide your embarrassment by getting angry or pointing the finger at someone else. But then, I think as the course of that 2006 went on, I think it became pretty evident that the only one to blame really was, for the situation was me. I had areas of my game that I needed to work on, and I put it off, and as a consequence, I didn't find myself getting the rewards that I felt I probably, I felt like I probably deserved them naively rather than earned them. So I needed to go away and earn them.
That 2007 Rugby World Cup, wow, 7 tries. But it was an Australia team that nobody was really talking about going into that Rugby World Cup. All the talk was on, this is New Zealand's time. New Zealand is going to deliver. Even ourselves were actually, Ireland were hitting a bit of decent form going into the test start of the series. Hopes were high that we could get to a quarter or a semi-final. People were talking England coming off. This is a new English team coming again. So people were saying, well, you know, Springboks, who knows, they might come around. But no, Australia was maybe 5th, 6th in terms of that sort of talking about that sort of line.
Mm-hmm.
Did that sort of really fuel that sort of motivation to have a good World Cup? Because as we know, in that 07 Rugby World Cup, although South Africa went on to win it, he outperformed New Zealand. England, obviously, they had a poor World Cup as well. So did you feel this, look, with our history and our heritage in Rugby World Cups, that people are talking us down a bit?
No, I don't know. I mean, I think within the squad, we were pretty, we were pretty happy with where we're at. You know, we had the likes of Gregan, Larkham, Georgie Smith. You know, like we had a good squad. And, you know, we're going through the pool stages pretty well. We went through pretty comfortably, and we just came up against the England side that had a scrum that just, that just sort of pulled us apart a little bit and made it pretty difficult off the back of that. And yeah, I mean, we had an injury to Stephen Larkham. He had a knee injury throughout that, and a young Berwick Barnes took the 10. We had some changes in personnel in the forward pack, and like I said, you know, Andy Sheridan, those guys were just beasts in that tournament, and I went all the way through, and South Africa beat England in the final, I think. Yeah. So, they're pretty decent side. Unfortunately for us, you know, we were outplayed in Marseille to the English, and we were, you know, busy drowning our sorrows, and then we got the word that New Zealand had just been beaten, so it brought a bit of light to our situation. So we all had a bit of a toast to that, and we're pretty happy about that situation.
And we speak about the highs of a rugby player's career. Obviously, everyone wants to play in a World Cup, it's their pinnacle. 2011, even though you were initially ruled out of it, do you look back in that Rugby World Cup and say to yourself, I didn't get the breaks there? That was probably a highlight, for one of those highlights for me, one of those highlight moments, and just everything that could have gone wrong for Drew Mitchell went wrong for Drew Mitchell in that 2011 Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, look, you know what, in some ways I can look at that, but I actually kind of see that as one of my prouder moments, to be honest. Like in 2011 in April, I dislocated my foot and it spun around. It was facing the wrong way, and I was 4 months out from a World Cup, and I remember sitting in the hospital, and you know, I might have been on a little bit of morphine, but I was telling Robbie Deans at the time not to forget about me, and he was just like, mate, just worry about the operation and things. Like, it was that same night, so he obviously thought I had a little bit, some other things I needed to worry about, but I was just like, mate, don't forget about me. I'll get myself back from this, and yeah, I had the ankle relocated, had the screw put in, and you know, within 3 months I was back on my feet, and I played 20 minutes of club football before that World Cup, before Robbie Deans picked me in his squad. Wow. So, I mean, so like in some ways I just think, and look, and to be fair as well, like I was picked on previous, like my history rather than my current form, clearly, because I only played 20 minutes of football for Randwick Rugby Club. So Robbie picked me on that, which I'm, you know, forever grateful for. And I got a chance off the bench against Ireland, started against the USA and Russia. And just went to pick up a ball off the ground, stretching out against Russia. And just the hamstring went. So really what it was a hamstring on the other side, because that one had kind of probably carried the load of the other, like the injured leg for so long that I think after a little while it probably fatigued. I just didn't have the conditioning in my legs. So I went kind of from one a day sort of training to then going into a full camp, which is 2 sessions a day, and the rigors of the contact and all that sort of stuff. And I think it just got to the point where my body just wasn't conditioned for it. And I just, like I said, I just reached down to pick up a ball against Russia, and the hamstring popped in the last pool game, and I was on a flight the next day heading home. So whilst it wasn't the ending that I would have liked, I find myself really fortunate and lucky to have had those games and those experiences, and even to go to New Zealand and experience another World Cup. And yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult because obviously the competitor in me would have preferred to have stayed there and gone through to the quarters and the semis and that type of stuff. But yeah, I think if I look at it, it's probably one of my prouder moments from in terms of where I fought my way back from to put myself in that World Cup.
I suppose, Drew, time is nearly catching up on us now. So one or two last sort of things to touch on. Obviously, we have to touch on Toulon, 82 appearances, 170 points, numerous European French crowns. Was always that a goal for you to play in Europe? Was Toulon the main attraction? Had you offers from English Premier League? Had you offers from Munster, Leinster, any of the provinces here in Ireland? Or was the only goal to be on that sort of, dare I say, that club barbarians team that was Toulon?
No, look, I always wanted to go play overseas somewhere. Like I said, back when I was 17, they said rugby is a global game, and for that reason, I really wanted to play there somewhere at some point. And I wanted to play when I still had something to offer, rather than kind of going over at the route like the last sort of twilight years of my career. I wanted to go over. I think I went over at 29. I still felt like I had my best footy ahead of me. And look, I spoke to some teams in the Irish, like some of the Irish provinces as well as the English. The French were probably a bit more serious around, me playing there. Stade Francais was probably the most lucrative deal for me to go to. But when I looked at it, I mean, obviously the team and the caliber of the team that Toulon had was just absolutely phenomenal. I don't know if we'll see another team like that that I went to. I went there once they'd already won a Heineken Cup trophy, so they were they're already a really successful side. And I remember talking to Brian Abana. He went there the same year I went there, and we were talking. We'd played against each other for so many years, and then the opportunity of playing alongside each other. But I think probably the biggest one was Makido. I think, yeah, for me, and I'm super happy that I made that decision. I can't imagine my time at another French club without Gitz, just the amount that I lent on him. It can be pretty isolating being in a different culture, different language. I was over there by myself. He had his wife and then had his family when he was there, the birth of his two boys over there. And just to be able to have them as a support network just around the corner, and to be so close with them before I got there as well, but then to build on that and to share some of those memories and those experiences with them. And I say them because it wasn't just Matt, it was Bianca, his wife, and then his kids as well growing up. Just to kind of be really entrenched in their family dynamic was really special. And I guess I probably didn't picture it being as impactful as it was before I made that decision, but now I can't imagine. And that's probably also a big reason as well. Like when I was finishing my time at Toulon, I was talking to Japanese clubs, I was talking to Toulon again, and I don't know, I think starting again at a different club or starting in a different, say Japan, different culture, different language, it didn't appeal to me had I not had that sort of support network around me and with me. So that was sort of how big it was for me to have them there. But then as well, like when I was walking into the dressing room or the weights room the first day, and there's Bucky's and there's Johnny Wilkinson and there's, just Chris Marceau, all these guys that you've just played so many years trying to fight for their respect and, fight against them, be competitive against them. And then all of a sudden you're in there and you're their teammate. And it's just a really sort of special, unique kind of part of my career. And I'm super, I'm really happy that I made those decisions because, at the same time as well, I could have just stayed at the New South Wales Waratahs and continued my career here because, when I was making that decision to go play in France, I was also giving up the opportunity to play in the gold jersey for the Wallabies as well. So, because at that time, the rules didn't allow it.
And I just want a quick sort of answer, a quick yes or no. Obviously, you mentioned there you spoke to some of the Irish provinces. Did you speak to Munster?
Yeah, I did actually. Yeah. I did speak to Munster. I think they've got a pretty rich history with some of the Aussies representing them. Paulie Warwick, and more recently having Stephen Larkham over there. But yeah, I did speak to them. Mark Chisholm, I think he went up there as well at one point. But I think, mate, to be honest, whilst I've always enjoyed my time in Ireland, and I'm going to be up there next week for the Irish Wallabies test. I I think France really captured me, and I really wanted to experience that.
And obviously, sticking with the Irish element now for the second last question, Drew, you would have come up against many Irish players down to your time, and obviously this is an Irish documentary. Was there any Irish player, particularly in your own position, that you really look forward to going against your opposite, maybe fullback, the opposite winger, that you admired in your time playing Ireland, that you said, yeah, look, I'm going to get my worths here coming up against him?
Yeah, look, probably a couple of guys. I think, also the nature of sort of going through it was under 21 World Cup back when we were playing. It's now changed obviously to 20s, but like Andrew Trimble and also big time Tommy Bowe. I thought, I think I just really enjoyed playing against those guys. Even Horgan, earlier on in my career, is pretty physically imposing kind of a guy. But yeah, I think because Trimble and Tommy Bowe and I were all around sort of the same age, same era, played each other in sort of age group stuff, and then through, and just always had a healthy rivalry, and also like a pretty unhealthy catch up after a game, having a couple of Guinness, which was always nice. Just getting to know these guys off the field was always fantastic. But look, I hopefully I get to catch up with those guys when I visit Ireland next week. But I enjoy the way they played. Always having to be on top of your game defensively when you're playing against them, and it was always just like a healthy rivalry between myself and those guys.
And finally, to Drew Mitchell, if you look back at Drew Mitchell in 2007, reflecting in the mirror, looking back across you, what would you describe him as his main attributes when he was in his pomp in terms of his abilities, and what made him the man? What did rugby do to him to make him the man he is today?
Mate, I don't know. Look, I was just someone who just enjoyed myself. I took my craft seriously, but I knew when to switch on and when to switch off. And like I said, I'm pretty aware of my flaws in my game, but I also like to play to my strengths a little bit. And in some ways, my flaw at the beginning of my career was probably one of my strengths at the end. And I wasn't that physically imposing when I first started, and that's been kind to myself. But towards the end, I felt like my ability to bump and to be strong through contact was probably one of my strongest attributes. So I think just identifying where my weaknesses were, and rather than shying away from it, trying to turn them into a strength. And so like I said, from being dubbed apples from George Gregan to then being able to break tackles and hold my own, or if not, like sort of thrive in those contact areas was something that I really enjoyed, and probably I'm probably most proud of.
On that note, Drew Mitchell, time has caught up with us there. Thanks for sharing your life story. Drew Mitchell, Australia's highest try scorer in the Rugby World Cup, played in 2 Rugby World Cups in 2015, 3 actually, 2015, 2007, and a part in 2011. 71 appearances for Australia, 170 points, numerous European and French crowns for too long. Obviously, Australian Rookie Player of the Year in 2004 as well, made his debut as well. Drew Mitchell, take care.
No worries. Thanks very much.